With the edge of a worn plastic spoon, I carved another thin line into the concrete wall beside my narrow bunk. 731 marks. 731 days since my daughter-in-law's lies put me here. 731 days of planning exactly how I would reclaim everything they stole from me. My name is Robert Mackenzie. I'm 64 years old, and until 2 years ago, I owned Mackenzie Construction, the largest residential building company in Ontario. I built that company from nothing, starting with a single pickup truck and a toolbox when I was 23. My late wife Sarah and I poured everything into making it succeed. When she died of cancer 8 years ago, I promised her I'd keep the family legacy strong for our children. I had 2 children. My son, Marcus, 41, who I groomed to take over the business, and my daughter, Claire, 36, who became a family law attorney. Both brilliant. Both raised to understand the value of hard work and integrity, or so I thought. Marcus married a woman named Simone Dutoit 3 years ago. She was 32, a former event planner with a dazzling smile and expensive tastes. From the first dinner we shared, something felt wrong about her. The way she calculated every word, the way her eyes lingered on the photos of our lakefront properties displayed in my study, the way she interrupted Marcus when he tried to discuss business decisions with me. But Marcus was in love, completely, blindly in love. And I kept my concerns to myself because that's what fathers do. They support their children's choices, even when instinct screams otherwise. The first real warning came 14 months after their wedding. Marcus called me to his downtown condo for what he described as an urgent family matter. I arrived to find Simone sitting on their white leather sofa, her face carefully composed in an expression of distress. Marcus stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his face grave. Simone was pregnant, they told me. 4 months along. They'd waited to share the news because of complications. The doctor had ordered bed rest. Marcus would need to step back from the company temporarily to care for her. I congratulated them. I offered to hire additional help at the office. I suggested they move into my home where I could assist. Simone declined every offer with a sweet smile that never reached her eyes. The complications, she explained, required privacy. Stress could harm the baby. They needed space. Marcus would work from home as much as possible. Over the next 2 months, Marcus became distant. He missed board meetings, stopped answering my calls promptly. When we did speak, Simone was always nearby, her presence like a shadow. Claire noticed it too. She pulled me aside after a Sunday dinner Marcus and Simone skipped. Claire said there's something wrong with how Simone controls him. She said Marcus looks exhausted. She said when she visited their condo, Simone wouldn't let her stay more than 20 minutes, claiming the pregnancy made her sensitive to visitors. I brushed off Claire's concerns. I told her Marcus was just being a devoted husband. I told her Simone was probably overwhelmed. I told her to give them space. I should have listened to my daughter. The incident happened on a Wednesday afternoon in late September. I was at the office reviewing blueprints for a new development in Mississauga when my phone rang. Marcus. His voice was shaking, barely coherent. Simone was bleeding. She'd fallen. She was at Toronto General Hospital. She was losing the baby. I dropped everything and rushed to the emergency room. I found Marcus in the waiting area, his head in his hands. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red and hollow. "She lost the baby," he said. "The doctors tried but couldn't save it. And it's your fault, Dad." The words hit me like a physical blow. I asked him what he meant. What could possibly be my fault? That's when Simone appeared from the corridor, supported by a nurse. Her hospital gown was pristine white. Her makeup was smudged artfully around her eyes. She looked directly at me and said, "You did this." I stood there, speechless, as she spun her story. She told the nurse I had come to their condo that morning, that I had been furious about Marcus missing work, that I had grabbed her by the arm during an argument, that when she tried to pull away, I pushed her, that she fell down 3 steps leading into their living room, that she started bleeding immediately but was too afraid to call for help because I threatened her. Every word was a lie. I hadn't been to their condo in 2 months. I had been at the office all morning with 7 witnesses. But Simone's performance was flawless. The tears, the trembling hands, the way she flinched when I tried to approach. Marcus believed her. My own son looked at me with disgust and horror, and believed his wife over his father. The nurse called security. Security called the police. Within an hour, I was in an interrogation room at 52 Division, being questioned about assault causing bodily harm and criminal negligence causing death of an unborn child. I kept repeating that I wasn't there, that I had been at work, that they could check with my project manager, my secretary, the entire office. But the detective assigned to my case was young and ambitious. He looked at me like I was just another abusive old man who thought his money could buy him out of consequences. They charged me that night. The judge denied bail. He said I posed a flight risk, given my resources. He said the severity of the alleged crime warranted detention. He said my advanced age didn't preclude me from being dangerous. My lawyer, Mitchell Grant, was one of Toronto's best criminal defense attorneys, but we faced an uphill battle. Simone had photographs, bruises on her arm that she claimed I inflicted, medical records showing a miscarriage, a statement from a neighbor who claimed to hear arguing from their condo that morning. I told Mitchell the neighbor was lying. I told him to subpoena my office security footage. I told him to interview my staff. But Marcus had moved quickly. As the majority shareholder after my arrest, he froze all company accounts pending an internal audit. He claimed he needed to investigate potential financial misconduct. What he really did was cut off my access to the legal defense fund I had set aside for emergencies. Mitchell tried to work pro bono, but the case dragged on. 6 months, 9 months, a year. The courts were backlogged. Evidence got delayed. Witnesses became unavailable. And I sat in the Toronto East Detention Center, watching my life disintegrate through legal briefs and supervised phone calls. Claire believed me. She fought harder than anyone. She hired private investigators. She found inconsistencies in Simone's story. The supposed neighbor who heard arguing, he was Simone's former co-worker. The medical records, they came from a clinic known for cutting corners. The bruises, they appeared only in photographs taken by Simone herself, not by the emergency room staff. But Claire was also financially dependent on Marcus. Her law practice was struggling. She had student loans. When she pushed too hard on my behalf, Marcus cut her off completely. He removed her from the company insurance plan. He stopped taking her calls. Simone filed a restraining order against Claire for harassment. My daughter was forced to choose between fighting for me and supporting her own children. I told her to stop. I told her to protect her family. I told her I would handle this myself. That was the moment I stopped being a desperate innocent man and became a patient strategist. Inside detention, I had time. So much time. 18 hours a day in a cell gave a man clarity. I stopped protesting my innocence to anyone who would listen. I stopped filing desperate motions. I stopped hoping the system would save me. Instead, I started planning. I befriended another inmate, a forensic accountant named Gerald Sue, who was awaiting trial for embezzlement. Gerald taught me things my business education never covered: how to hide assets in numbered companies, how to trace financial irregularities, how to build an evidence trail that would stand up in court. I used my limited phone privileges carefully, not to call Marcus or beg him to believe me, not to rage at Simone, but to contact old business associates Marcus didn't know about, men and women who owed me favors from decades of fair dealing. I had them quietly document everything happening at Mackenzie Construction during my absence. I learned Marcus was making terrible decisions, overextending credit, accepting contracts with unrealistic timelines, cutting corners on safety to boost profit margins. Simone had convinced him to mortgage 3 of our properties to finance a luxury condo development that was bleeding money. The company I'd spent 40 years building was crumbling, but I forced myself to watch without intervening, because every mistake Marcus made created evidence. Every bad decision left a paper trail. Every corner he cut could be documented. The trial finally happened in month 19. The Crown's case fell apart quickly. Claire's investigators had done their work. The neighbor recanted his statement when confronted with phone records, proving he was in Montreal the morning of the alleged incident. The clinic that provided Simone's medical records was under investigation for fraud. The photographs of bruises couldn't be authenticated. Most damaging, emergency room records showed something Simone's lawyer never disclosed. She had been treated for a miscarriage 3 days before the alleged assault. The baby was already gone when she claimed I pushed her. The whole thing was a setup, a premeditated lie designed to remove me from the company so Marcus and Simone could take complete control. The judge dismissed all charges. He apologized to me on behalf of the court. He referred Simone's case to the Crown for perjury prosecution. He ordered my immediate release. I walked out of the Toronto East Detention Center on a cold March morning after 731 days. Mitchell was waiting outside with fresh clothes and a detailed briefing on everything that had happened during my imprisonment. Marcus had financially destroyed Mackenzie Construction. The company was 90 days from insolvency, $7 million in debt, lawsuits pending from contractors we'd failed to pay. Our reputation shattered. But Marcus didn't know about the insurance policy I'd set up 20 years earlier. A key person insurance policy that paid out $5 million if I was incapacitated for more than 18 months. The payout had been sitting in a trust account, untouched, because Marcus didn't know it existed. He also didn't know that before my arrest, I had transferred 49% of the company shares to a numbered corporation. On paper, I owned 51% personally. In reality, that numbered corporation controlled the shares, and the numbered corporation was held in trust for Claire. Marcus thought he controlled everything with his 51%. He was wrong. I didn't go home immediately. I checked into a hotel near the financial district. I showered for an hour, washing away 2 years of institutional soap. I ordered room service and ate slowly, savoring food that didn't come from a cafeteria tray. Then I called Claire. She cried when she heard my voice. She offered to come immediately. I told her not yet. I told her I needed to handle something first. I called Marcus. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was guarded, cautious. He knew I'd been released. He probably expected rage, accusations, demands. Instead, I invited him to lunch the next day. The King Edward Hotel, 1 o'clock. Just the two of us. He agreed. I could hear the confusion in his voice. I arrived first, choosing a corner table with a view of the entire dining room. Marcus came 10 minutes late, walking with the careful composure of someone expecting confrontation. He'd aged during my incarceration. Gray streaked his dark hair. Lines creased his forehead. His expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. He sat down without meeting my eyes. I ordered for both of us. The same meal we'd shared countless times over business lunches. For 5 minutes, we sat in silence, while the waiter poured water and set bread baskets on the table. Finally, Marcus spoke. He said he was sorry. He said he believed Simone. He said everything had gotten complicated. I didn't respond immediately. I broke a piece of bread, buttered it carefully, took a bite. Then I looked at him directly. I told him I knew everything. The financial decisions, the mortgaged properties, the failed condo development, the $7 million in debt, the contractors suing us, the employees he'd laid off. Every single disaster. His face went pale. I told him I also knew about the numbered corporation, about the shares he thought he controlled but actually didn't, about the insurance payout he had no idea existed, about the evidence Claire's investigators had compiled showing his mismanagement of the company. I told him I could destroy him, professionally, financially, personally. With one phone call to my lawyers, I could strip him of everything. Marcus started to speak. I held up my hand. But I'm not going to do that, I said. The confusion on his face would have been satisfying if I'd been seeking satisfaction. But I'd learned something during those 731 days. Revenge through destruction is empty. Real justice requires something harder. It requires teaching. I told Marcus that I was taking back control of Mackenzie Construction, effective immediately. He would remain as an employee, but not as an executive. He would work in the field, learning the business from the ground up the way I had 40 years ago. He would report to Claire, who would be the new chief operating officer. I told him the $5 million from the insurance policy would save the company from insolvency, but only if he agreed to my terms. Otherwise, I would let the company collapse and he could file for personal bankruptcy. I told him he had 24 hours to decide, and I told him that Simone was not part of this offer. If he wanted any chance at redemption, he would need to choose his marriage or his future. Marcus sat frozen, his lunch untouched. I stood up, placed 3 $50 bills on the table, and walked out. He called me at 11 o'clock that night. He agreed to every term. He told me he was filing for divorce from Simone the next morning. The reconstruction of Mackenzie Construction took 8 months. I returned to the office and found chaos. Disorganized files, abandoned projects, demoralized staff. I spent the first month just stabilizing operations, calling contractors, negotiating payment plans, reassuring clients. Claire joined me as COO. She was brilliant, turning around the financial mess with surgical precision. She renegotiated our debts. She secured new credit lines. She restructured our contracts. Marcus worked in the field. I assigned him to our most difficult sites. Renovation projects in old buildings. New constructions with impossible deadlines. He worked 12-hour days, came home covered in dust and paint, learned what it actually meant to build something with your own hands. For the first 3 months, he avoided me. We communicated through Claire. He submitted his daily reports, but never asked to meet. I let him keep that distance. Some lessons required solitude to truly absorb. Simone hired 3 different lawyers trying to go after Marcus's assets in the divorce. Each time, they discovered the same truth. Marcus had nothing. The company shares he thought he owned were tied up in complex corporate structures. The properties were mortgaged beyond value. His personal accounts had been drained, paying debts. She settled for $50,000 and disappeared from our lives. The criminal charges against her for perjury moved slowly through the system. Her trial was scheduled for the following year. I attended every preliminary hearing, not to glare at her or make statements, just to sit in the gallery and remind her that truth has consequences. 6 months after I returned, Marcus finally asked to meet with me. Not in the office. At the original Mackenzie Construction headquarters, a small warehouse in Scarborough, where I'd started the company decades ago. We still owned the building, using it for equipment storage. I arrived to find Marcus standing in the middle of the empty space, looking at the old photographs on the walls. Pictures of my first crew. The first house we built. Sarah and I cutting the ribbon at our first major project. He turned when he heard me enter. This time, he met my eyes. He told me he'd been a fool. He told me Simone had manipulated him from the beginning. She'd researched our family before they met, targeted him deliberately at a charity gala. She'd faked the pregnancy using hormone supplements to create symptoms. She'd staged the miscarriage with medical records bought from a corrupt clinic. He told me the worst part wasn't losing everything. It was realizing he'd sent his own father to prison, that he'd believed lies over a lifetime of evidence that I would never hurt anyone, that he'd been so blinded by what he thought was love that he'd destroyed the only real love he'd ever known, his family. Marcus broke down, completely, 41 years old, and crying like a child. I wanted to hug him. Every instinct screamed to comfort my son, but I knew that would be too easy. Some wounds need to scar before they can truly heal. Instead, I told him something I'd learned during my time inside. I told him about the other men I met in detention, men who'd made terrible mistakes, men who'd been wrongfully accused, men who'd spent decades inside for crimes they did or didn't commit. I told him about a man named Samuel who served 19 years for a crime his brother committed. Samuel protected his brother because he loved him, but when he finally got out, his brother wanted nothing to do with him. The guilt had poisoned their relationship beyond repair. I told him about another man named David who was wrongfully convicted of assault. David's wife divorced him while he was inside. His kids stopped visiting. When evidence finally cleared him after 7 years, he came out to find his entire family had moved on without him. They were relieved he was innocent, but they'd already built new lives that didn't include him. I told Marcus these stories because I needed him to understand. What happened to me wasn't unique. It wasn't even particularly unusual. The justice system fails people every single day. Families betray each other. Love blinds people to truth. These are human constants. The question isn't whether these things happen. The question is what you do after. Samuel never forgave his brother. He lived another 12 years, bitter and alone, before dying of a heart attack. David tried to force his way back into his family's life. He showed up at his ex-wife's new home. He demanded visitation with his kids. He made everyone miserable until his children finally agreed to restraining orders. Both men let their trauma define the rest of their lives. I told Marcus I refused to do that. I told him I'd spent 731 days planning revenge, but somewhere in those plans, I'd realized something. True justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. Not restoring what was, because that's impossible, but restoring what could still be. I told him I forgave him. Marcus looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I explained that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing consequences. It means choosing to believe that people can learn from their mistakes. It means creating space for redemption, even when redemption seems impossible. But, I told him, forgiveness is a process, not an event. He would need to earn back my trust, piece by piece, project by project, year by year. I couldn't promise how long it would take or even if we'd ever be truly close again, but I was willing to try if he was. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. We stood there in that empty warehouse for a long time. Finally, I pulled out a set of blueprints from my bag. A small residential project in Etobicoke. 3 townhouses, modest budget, tight timeline. I told Marcus this was his project. He would be the lead contractor. He would manage the entire build from foundation to finishing. I would be available for consultation, but the decisions were his. The success or failure would be his. It was a test. We both knew it. Marcus took the blueprints. He studied them carefully, his training as my son coming back. He asked intelligent questions about the site conditions, about material suppliers, about the crew he'd need. I answered each question, and slowly, over the course of an hour, we began to sound like we used to. Father and son, teacher and student, partners in building something that would last. That project took 4 months. Marcus made mistakes. He ordered materials twice when he forgot to check inventory. He misread the electrical plans and had to redo a week of work. He went over budget by 8%, but he finished. On time, within acceptable quality standards, and he did it honestly. No cutting corners, no hiding problems. When he discovered an issue with the foundation halfway through, he called me immediately. We worked together to find a solution. The townhouses sold within 3 weeks of completion. The new owners loved them. Marcus attended the final walkthrough with each family, answering their questions, promising to address any concerns. After the last family left, he sat on the front steps of the center unit. I joined him. We watched the sun set over the neighborhood, these 3 small buildings standing as evidence of possibility. Marcus told me he understood now what I'd tried to teach him his entire life. That building isn't just about structures. It's about creating homes where families will laugh and cry and grow. It's about leaving something better than you found it. It's about integrity even when no one's watching. He told me he'd wasted years chasing the wrong things, impressing people who didn't matter, acquiring possessions instead of building relationships, believing that control was the same as success. He told me prison was probably the best thing that ever happened to him, not because he enjoyed my suffering, but because it shattered his illusions completely. It forced him to see what actually mattered. I told him I wished there had been an easier way to learn that lesson. We both laughed. Dark humor born from darkness survived. That was 2 years ago. Today, Mackenzie Construction is thriving again. Claire runs daily operations with precision I never achieved. Marcus manages our field crews and has become respected for his attention to quality and safety. I serve as chairman, focusing on strategic planning and mentoring young contractors. Marcus and I have dinner every Sunday. Sometimes it's comfortable, sometimes it's awkward. We're rebuilding a relationship that was shattered, and that takes time. Claire's law practice has grown into a successful family law firm. She specializes in cases involving elder abuse and financial exploitation. She's become a fierce advocate for seniors who face the kind of betrayal I experienced. Simone was convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice. She served 14 months in the Vanier Center for Women. She was released last fall and moved to Vancouver. I heard she's working in retail now. I hope she's found some peace. I don't hate her. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. What she did was unforgivable, but forgiveness isn't for her. It's for me. People often ask me how I survived 2 years of wrongful imprisonment without becoming bitter. They expect stories of meditation, or faith, or inner strength. The truth is simpler and harder than that. I survived by refusing to let the worst moment of my life become my entire story. Yes, I spent 731 days in detention for a crime I didn't commit. Yes, my son betrayed me. Yes, I lost 2 years that I can never recover. Those are facts. They're part of my history, but they're not the end of my history. I also spent 40 years building a company that employed hundreds of people and housed thousands of families. I raised 2 children who are now making the world better in their own ways. I loved a woman who taught me what partnership really means. I've mentored dozens of young contractors who've gone on to build successful businesses. One terrible chapter doesn't erase everything that came before or everything that comes after. The lesson I want to leave you with is this. Life will betray you. Not might, will. Someone you trust will hurt you. Something unfair will happen. You will face situations that feel impossible to survive. In those moments, you have a choice. You can let betrayal define you, turn bitter, spend your remaining years reliving your trauma, or you can acknowledge the pain, feel it fully, and then choose to build something better from the rubble. I chose to build. Every morning, I wake up in my home overlooking Lake Ontario. I make coffee the way Sarah taught me. I read the newspaper. I call my kids to check in. I go to work and solve problems. I mentor young people who remind me of myself at their age. Is my life perfect? No. Do I still have moments where I remember the sound of the cell door closing and feel my chest tighten? Yes. Do I sometimes look at Marcus and wonder if I've truly forgiven him? Absolutely. But I keep choosing to build, one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one project at a time, because that's what builders do. We take raw materials, broken pieces, difficult terrain, and we create something that didn't exist before. Something useful, something beautiful, something that lasts. The 731 marks on that cell wall. I asked the institution not to paint over them. I'm told they're still there, a record of my time. Maybe another wrongfully accused man will see them one day. Maybe he'll count them and realize he's not alone. Maybe they'll remind him that even the longest sentence eventually ends. And when it does, he'll face the same choice I did. Destruction or construction, bitterness or building. I pray he chooses wisely. My name is Robert Mackenzie. I'm 66 years old. I own Mackenzie Construction, the largest residential building company in Ontario. I spent 2 years of my life in detention for a crime I didn't commit. But that's not my story. My story is what I built after.